That's weird. So once I started to fall upon things and go through it, I was like, wait a second. There's a lot of negative roots in Haiti and in Dominican Republic. It's not all of you, but there's a lot more than I knew. I had the assumption based on doing my own research that I just assumed based on the other Caribbean islands, them, being migrants from South and Central America. Those are all mostly positive roosters. I just assumed. Okay, but I shouldn't assume it because remember, y'all are also colonized by the Judaic. Most people don't know that. That's why some Haitian people have Jewish last names. Does anyone know that? That's why Professor Jeffries got kicked out of City College. Big up to all my CCNY. I went to CCNY in New York City College, and Dr. Jeffries got kicked out of the City University. He was reestablished and they had to apologize because it was the truth. Most of you don't know because it's not in your history books. And I got the facts because that's something else I did. I took a picture from something that I wasn't supposed to from the Rhythm Library. There's a library that moves around in New York City and it never stays around in the same place. And you can get actual history. These are books that have been censored and they're supposed to be gone. So I took a picture. The Jewish people were part of colonization. You won't hear it because they're protecting themselves. They don't want you to know they participated in the so-called slave trade. So a lot of Jewish people actually have their last names. I mean, a lot of Haitian people have their DNA and have their last names. Okay, I'm giving you a little history lesson. And if you don't believe me, you already know Fluerbrun will always tell you to go check out my resources. Always fact check me. For always fact check me. Remember, I'm not a young gal anymore. I'm getting ancient. I've lived a life and I was in research. So also I had some really great professors. Big up to all the professors in New York City at the time. I had some of the most amazing, eclectic, really, really, really fun professors. And they would always make us do our research. Remember, that's back in the day. See, we didn't have Google, my loves. Let me school my millennials. We didn't have Googles. Back in the days, we go to the library and we do our research. So that's how I found out. That's how I knew that Professor Jeffries was telling the truth. The Jewish people did participate in the slave trade. They did. And they won't get any credit because they don't want you to know that. They give credit to the English. They give credit to the Spaniards, but they don't take credit. They want you to think that they're the abused people that have been, killed and murdered and Nazi camps, and that isn't true. And many of you don't realize in those Nazi camps there was a lot of groups of gypsies in the camps that were being killed and euthanized. There were a lot of other groups other than Judaic people, and it was only a specific type of Jewish people they were going after. They were going after a certain type. Okay, and if they were victims of that totally, how could they take over the whole? This might be taken off. I better shut up. Let me shut up. If they were victims, how could they be taken on all networks? How could every Jewish last name Goldman, all these Goldman Sachs, how could they be the head of all banking systems? Because it was bait and switch. It's almost like a firefighter setting fires so that he can be the hero. So they'll basically create a smoke screen of some sort of big event so that you think that they're all victims. And meanwhile, they're going underneath the guys, that smoke screen, that guys that, oh my gosh, we know, da da da. And then meanwhile, they take over the diamond. Go to the Diamond District in New York. Big up to all my New York brethren. They can confirm this. My New York brethren can tell you, go to the Diamond District. Who do you see in the Diamond District when you're hustling for your diamonds? It's a Judaic community. They have that all on lock. Go in New York. Over for some of you who are visiting Rockefeller Center, go around the corner. That's the Diamond District. Go see because I remember, when I got my wedding ring, my husband got my wedding ring and I got his wedding ring in the Diamond District. So when I went to go buy my husband's wedding ring, I wanted it to be when you design your own ring. So I wanted it designed, a certain way. So I had his ring made with the diamonds set in a certain way. So I had to go to the Diamond District and I had to hustle. And they hustle, and I got what I wanted. He loved his ring. Okay, so custom made. Thank you. It was beautiful ring. But the Diamond District is all the Judaic, and that's the Ashkenazi community. Okay, so make sure I tell you, there's different sects of Judaic people. There's Ashkenazis, which is the Khazar Jews. They aren't native Jews. They are converts from Russia. Then there are Sephardic. Sephardic are like from Morocco, from Spain, from Africa. Those are Sephardic Jews. Those are the ones who actually have the original blood of Sheba, the actual lineage of Sheba. Okay, they're actually the 12th, they're part of the original 12 tribes. They have the DNA marker. That's why they bring the Sephardic Jews over into Israel so they can try to access the stargates. Anyway, don't have me go on this. I'll go all day.
Because the Jews stick together. They make sure everything that comes up that has any potential for profits and well-being and quality of life, they build it around the Jewish religion. Because see, basically Jews are whites.
Yeah.
They're Khazarians. And the original Jews were really blacks coming out of Ethiopia.
Absolutely, yes.
But black folk let them run them out of Africa, run them out of the Middle East, run them out past Kenya, down into Africa. Then the Khazarians. The Khazarians are a mixture of Mongoloids, Russians, and Polish.
Yeah.
And they're Khazarians. They came in and took over your religion in about 700 to 800 A.D. And I'm trying to think when the prime minister, I can't think of his name now. He asked 6 black rabbis to come up to that area between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea and teach the Khazarians a new religion.
Yes.
And they brought the Jewish religion up. They not the Jewish religion. Then they brought the
Hebraic.
the Hebrew scriptures and all up there and introduced it to the Jews, and Jews took it over. So by the 1100s, the Jews had taken over the Jewish religion. And left blacks out there hanging. They said they were now the new chosen people because they had pushed black folk out.
So,
Okay, so we were talking about the blood types and how okay, so that's why in Haiti and in Dominican Republic, which used to be La Hispaniola, many of you who don't know Caribbean history, it used to be La Hispaniola. It was one island and one people. Okay, so that's why Haitian and Dominicans look for, they'll tell you differently because Dominicans say their Haitians are too brown or too they have a prejudice towards Haitians because they said they're too Negro. I'm blowing spots. You know, it's like the auntie and the grandmother who tells everybody's business. Yeah, it's true. Because the Haitians, because they had a lot of that DNA, that negative roots, they overcame the French. They were doing all kinds. They opened that portal so easily, and all the French were dying of diseases. They were up in the bush, murder. So when they got free, the Haitians, they tried to free the Dominican Padre, and they did. But the Dominicans like being under rule because they had mixed so much with the Spaniard that they were already under Stockholm syndrome. They were already suffering from a strong amount of Stockholm syndrome. So because they were already indoctrinated and mixed too much with that blood. See, when you mix too much with the enemy, you become the enemy. That's why I don't trust a lot of these tribal-based native indigenous groups in the States, because too much of them have been infiltrated by the $5 Indian. And you can't trust people who mix too much with the enemy because they don't realize too much of that quantified blood makes you the enemy. Okay, by the blood. And all of the ancestors are coming from underneath the ground right now. All of the indigenous ancestors are coming and they're causing ish to the $5 Indian. So I don't really get involved in native politics anymore because a lot of the $5 Indians are getting a lot of stink from the Willy Wonka and his League of Doom because they aren't really natives. And they're getting the same thing that their ancestors actually did to the actual quantified natives. Okay? If you don't look like me, you aren't that much native. You can go back in the history books. I tell people when they get at me all the time, I was like, you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself. I look like my indigenous Carib and Arawak women. When I went into Brazil, to the natives, I look like them. So I could quantify myself saying my DNA has not shifted so much that my physical phenotype has changed. So unless you look like me or liken like me or have a similar copper complexion with, you can have straighter hair because they've been mixed with the Mongolians. They're mixed with the Asiatics. But if you don't look similar to me, you aren't quantified as an indigenous. I don't really get in those politics because the indigenous should have more copper skin and more coily hair. The originals were actually coily hair. They look like, remember Columbus said they look like Negroes. He thought he was in Africa. Okay, so those are the original indigenous in the Northern Americas. If you don't look like that, you don't have the quantified amount of DNA to really speak on behalf of the indigenous people. So that's why there's a lot of ish going on governmentally, because you have people who think that they're indigenous based on lies, based on $5 Indian antics, and they're thinking they're speaking on behalf of the tribes, but you aren't that tribe. All of the ancestors are coming underneath the ground, and they're only contacting their own. They don't know who you are. Okay, when I saw the Cherokee kick out authentic Cherokee brown people, saying that they don't have the quantified amount of DNA, I know I'm going on a tangent. They don't have, well, I'm just, the last thing I'll say. When I saw the Cherokee nations, because they're splintered, when I saw some of the Cherokee nations questioning some of the brown Cherokee, saying that they are not quantified and their blood work does not quantify them as indigenous, I was like, that's how I knew. That is because if you were an indigenous, you would recognize your brethren and your sistren. You would be able to recognize it. DNA matters. That's why we're getting into blood types today. DNA matters. When I go places and people recognize me, they recognize my DNA before anything else. So if you can't recognize your sistren and they are actually from those lands, that means you are in scepter. You, by the nature of you being so watered down, or your ancestors paying $5 to take on the indigenous nationality, and you are taking, you're calling yourself, if you don't look like me, you probably aren't the indigenous. I'm being honest. It's not a judgment. It's a fact. And I'm all about DNA. Okay. I don't look like all DNA. I look like many of the tribal groups, especially the Blackfoot. I'm reminiscent, but my daughters are actually, their father is mixed with the Cherokee and the Blackfoot. So I can speak quantified. I come from two lines. And I mated with another line. I mated with the indigenous from this region, and I come from the indigenous from South and Central America that went into the Caribbean. So I'm just saying.
Land, which is the Moors or the Lenni Lenape, the Lenapes, the nappy-headed ones, who are the original Indians, the original so-called Indians. And if you look at the terminology of what the name of an Indian means, it is always about it being a copper tone or black energy, a black entity, or somebody what they call black, or a very dark-skinned person. So the Indians here are not the ones that you see, the light-skinned ones with blue eyes. These are what they call $5 Indians. These are not the true Indians.
In the late 1800s, there was something called the Dawes Rolls, which was basically a census that made records of people's ethnic backgrounds in order to determine which Native American tribes would get certain land allotments and other benefits. After slavery, many black people were associated with some of these tribes by bloodline, through marriage, through adoption, and even servitude. And because they were associated with these tribes, many black people were entitled to some of these benefits. The government did not want blacks to get these benefits, so they created a separate freedmen's list specifically for black people. They also started to list any full-blooded Native American who had African features as black because they didn't want them getting those benefits either. At the same time, they allowed white citizens to come in and pay money under the table to be listed as part Native American.
1895 and 1896, when a lot of the whites found out the benefits that these blacks are going to be entitled to, a lot of whites went to the Dawes Commission and say, look, why don't you put my name on there? They said, but you're not an Indian. So that's what they said, well, I'll give you $5. So then the rule got around, the policy got around that for $5, that a white could put his name on the Dawes rolls and be called himself an Indian and be entitled to all these benefits, and all their children could be entitled to all these benefits forever. And so that became known as what's called a $5 Indian. And so if you go around now and check most of the Indians, the so-called Indians in America, about 90% of them are not even Indians. Those are just whites now who are passing as Indians. But they're getting all the benefits, and they're not paying any taxes, getting free college education. They put up a little reservation on the land that they don't live on. They have another home off, and get all kind of benefits.
Iron Eyes Cody was another famous Native American person. He was in the media for years. In the 1970s, they utilized him for this pollution commercial. He was known as the Crying Indian. So he was a very well-known Native American in American culture. But the reality is, Iron Eyes Cody wasn't Native American at all. He was Sicilian. Both of his parents were from Sicily. So he didn't have one drop of Native American blood in him. He was another fake Indian.